So in our second lecture or session, we delve into the integrated geospatial information framework that was generated or that was developed by the World Bank and the UN. In this framework, we say that there are 9 strategic pathways, and we struggle to make sure that all the indicators of all these 9 strategic pathways are satisfied for us to have a sustainable NSDI. There is a possibility that you could try to have an SDI and talk about it for many years. But for us to avoid that, the UN and World Bank have created a framework that would enable us to accelerate the possibility of having an NSDI in our country. And for us to be able to do that, they have provided us 9 strategic pathways that have different indicators, and that they have already created also a methodology for us to be able to conduct a baseline study, as well as also be able to propose these strategic pathways or actions for the pathways. More so, different countries have been able to develop or to create or even to establish a baseline study, rather a baseline of the national spatial data infrastructure by conducting a baseline study in their different countries. For example, Mongolia, Uzbekistan, South Korea, and so many other countries. Even the Philippines. More so, they've also gone ahead to perform a socio-economic impact assessment to understand what are the economic benefits of having this NSDI. One of the challenges that has hampered the NSDI is convincing the policymakers that an NSDI is very important. Most often, the GIS specialists keep on talking to themselves in the room, hoping that the policymakers will understand them. However, the policymakers or the implementers or the common man out there wants to know, how much do I benefit when I implement a national spatial data infrastructure? And that's basically the biggest question that's answered by a socio-economic impact assessment. So as we shall see, there are many use cases that can be developed from different domains. For example, in the domain of land administration and planning, we could have different use cases. Use cases like developing a land information system, developing a public land management and government information system, land information system, and or maybe we could have something to do with taxation for housing. We could have also use cases, for example, from the agriculture, and for all these use cases, we can be able to establish the benefits of geospatial information. What would be the benefit of you using geospatial information to be able to leverage or to be able to bring forth these use cases to life? So let's delve into the integrated geospatial information framework. Like we said, it has 9 strategic pathways. The first pathway is about governance. So it establishes leadership and a governance model and institutional arrangements. For example, we said different institutions generate data. But what are their obligations as far as sharing this data, as far as managing this data, maintaining it, updating it? What are their custodianship guidelines or obligations. Who is supposed to generate which information, or rather which data? And who is supposed to coordinate all these institutions to be able to generate all this data? To be able to answer that, then we have to think about governance. In the context of Uganda, the biggest challenge as to why we don't have an NSDI currently is because we have poor governance. If the governance is changed, for example, most likely many things would be solved as far as the NSDI is concerned. So the challenge that we have is poor governance, and we shall have a time when we look through the IGIF framework and the indicators and then be able to explain what is currently in our country. The next pathway talks about the policy and legal aspects. It tries to establish whether there is a robust policy or legal framework for sharing information or for the exchange of geospatial information in institutions. And then the other pathway is the finance. Who funds the establishment of this NSDI? What is the business model for the NSDI? What is the value proposition of the NSDI? It also identifies the investment needs and the potential means of financing. Then we have also the data pathway, which establishes geospatial data framework, custodianship guidelines, and best practices for collection, management of geospatial information, and outline data quality improvement activities. And then we have technology and innovation, which basically leverages the least cost-effective technologies, innovations, and process improvements in geospatial information management systems and practices. Currently in Uganda, we have the Science Technology Innovation Agency that basically has included a component of geospatial innovations in the National Development Goals under the enhancing the science technology ecosystem for geospatial applications. Then we have another pathway that deals with standards. It establishes and ensures adoption of best practice standards and compliance mechanisms. And then the other pathway deals with partnerships. So being able to establish cross-sector and interdisciplinary cooperation, coordination, and collaborations with all levels of government, the geospatial industry, the private sector, academia, and the international community. So this pathway basically is able to cover all these aspects. The other pathway is about capacity and education. Just like we said, for us to be able to run a sustainable NSDI, we need to ensure that we have the people who are well trained, or the human resource that's well trained. So we need to have education programs and capacity development programs that will ensure that we have integrated geospatial information management sustained in the longer term. The last pathway is the communication and engagement. So this basically we say that we need to recognize that there are many stakeholders as far as the NSDI is concerned, and we need to make sure that these stakeholders are in tandem, or they can be able to communicate with each other. And this communication is very critical for us to deliver an integrated geospatial management framework within the country. So More information about the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework can be found on the UN IGIF framework website, on the UNGIM website. So what's the current state as far as the SDI is concerned in Uganda? Of course, there are some positives. The good thing is that we've been talking about the NSDI since the 1990s. We've been talking about it since the National Biomass Study in the 1990s. We even collected data sets. There was also the campus project that generated, that tried to digitalize land information. The biomass study tried to collect information on forestry and other spatial data sets, auxiliary data sets. And since then, different departments and agencies have had a lot of GIS projects geared towards collecting data, managing data, and also optimizing business processes within institutions. And currently also we have the National Planning Authority that has been able to develop a draft NSDI policy standards document, as well as also manuals for capacity building. So, in other words, the National Spatial Data Infrastructure has backing at different levels of government. It's something that's being talked about in many different departments. But the most interesting thing is that in the current NDP 4, which is starting this year and ending in 2030, the NSDI is talked about in several sections. For example, in the digital transformation section, it is explicitly stated that we need a metadata catalog, which will be a one-stop gateway for users to be able to access information for different applications as well as also planning. But there is also a vast of use cases that have been explored or that have been stated in the NDP 4. For example, in the agricultural sector, one of the plans is to make sure that there is a soils data set, that is, there's a new soils data set. So in other words, updating the new soils data set. And then the other one is to develop agricultural traceability systems that are geospatial in nature, so that they can be able to optimize or to improve markets for coffee, cocoa, and so many other products on the EU. So there is the EUDR framework compliance that has been included also in the NDP 4. In the land sector, we have a lot of geospatial applications that deal with implementation of SLAC, development of the public and government land information system, and then also improving on the existing LIS, developing of physical planning, physical development plans, and also collection of different data sets for the entire country as far as the orthophoto is concerned, and many other data sets. In other sectors, for example, the environment, we have also aspects to do with collection of data as well as also ecosystem service valuation. So in other words, we have a lot of use cases that have been explicitly stated within the NDP 4. Currently, many institutions also have invested in technology, both commercial and open source. So you'll find people using ArcGIS, people using Quantum GIS. There are large volumes of geospatial information that exist in different institutions The only challenge is how to access that information and also discover that exists. There is also some understanding of the value of geospatial data, but this is at a practitioner level. But we need, of course, to have some kind of understanding outside the practitioner's level, maybe have this kind of understanding at a level of policymakers, decision makers, and so many other levels that are non-practitioner levels. Then also, there are lots and lots of initiatives and projects that generate and use spatial data in the country. Some sectors have begun to develop their own geospatial ecosystems. For example, the energy working group, the environmental sector, the utilities sector, they have started developing their own geospatial ecosystems. So in other words, there are many positive things as far as an SDI is concerned in Uganda. But like we said, there are also negatives. So we already stated in our first slide, we stated the challenges, and those are the negatives. For example, accessing all this geospatial data that's being generated by different projects, different entities, is very complicated. And also, we have limited understanding of what this data is. So in this slide, we go on to talk about FAIR principles. They are very, very important because at one point in time, we'll have to explore the integrated geospatial information framework. And in the data pathway, they will tell you that data has to be fair. So we need to make sure that all our data within institutions is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And for data to be findable, it must have metadata and also have a globally unique persistent identifier for all the metadata and the data. And it must be indexed. This metadata or data should be indexed in a searchable or resource. Then we should be able to access this data or metadata via protocols that are open, that are universally acceptable, and this data should be interoperable, should be encoded in formats that are broadly accepted and with vocabularies that allow us to be able to share this information in a seamless way across organizations. And this data should also be reusable. In other words, we should have clear licenses defined, and they should also have provenance information, and all that is very important for us to be able to ensure that the geospatial data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So when you talk about fair data can be, fair data is data that is managed, it can be open, and also it can be proprietary data. So in our next activity, we shall still continue in our groups of 3, and in this activity we explore the IGIF assessment tool. So there's an Excel sheet that I've presented in the learning management system, and your task is to open that Excel sheet, look through the indicators, and then try to tell us or provide an initial baseline assessment for Uganda. Where are we as far as these 9 pathways of the NSDI in Uganda? Finally, you'll submit a field assessment form and a 3-pager report of the existing NSDI baseline report, study in Uganda.